Welcome to the Health Angle Podcast with Dr. Mike Headlee and Dr. Gordon Fimreite, where we'll be exploring different angles of health to achieve the best version of yourself. Now, here's your hosts, Dr. Mike and Dr. Gordon.
Welcome, everybody. I am Dr. Mike Headlee. With me is Dr. Gordon Fimreite. Welcome, Gordy.
Hi, and welcome to the Health Angle. Today, it's all about the carpal tunnel syndrome, which includes hand pain of all types. I think a lot of people confuse the hand pain that they're experiencing, Dr. Mike, for something else, and we're going to go into detail about that. What's your thought when you hear carpal tunnel syndrome?
Yeah, it's pretty common. Office workers with typing and repetitive use with mouse, carpenters, people that are in factories, and also pregnancy. When women are pregnant, a lot of times they get carpal tunnel symptoms, and it's very treatable. And I see it a good amount in my practice over the years. And it's fun to see those people because you can really, really help so many people from having surgery and then give them relief. So I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, this is a great subject. And I think people are probably wondering, well, what are the symptoms if I have carpal tunnel syndrome? Most people have tingling, numbness, some type of discomfort in the hands and in the fingers. It can be a problem with people, particularly if they're working with their hands. And that might, like you said, Mike, that might still include people in front of a computer working the mouse. So it could be people working with tools on site. The list goes on. Even people playing musical instruments, a guitar, just that repetitive motion over and over and over again. So it can be a real big deal for a lot of people. And it's one of the more common hand conditions, carpal tunnel syndrome is, and it affects the median nerve. The median nerve is the nerve that passes through the carpal bones. The carpal bones are basically the wrist bones, and there's 8 carpal bones, and it forms a small tunnel, a narrow tunnel, and the median nerve has to get through that uninterrupted. And if there is pain or symptomatology, it's usually on the thumb, usually on the palm side of the thumb, the first digit, second digit, and then half the third, and then part of the palm as well. And of course, that can vary depending if it actually really is a carpal tunnel type of syndrome. And we'll talk about alternatives of what might be causing that hand pain, numbness, tingling, et cetera, et cetera. What's your thought? And what kind of patients have you seen in the past with the type of symptoms, like when you have a patient that comes in with hand, wrist pain, tingling, numbness? What goes through your head?
I think I've only had 2 patients in like 30 years that have had carpal tunnel surgery, and it was a success as well, but then they have to wear braces and they're off work at whatever. My experience, it's very repetitive jobs in nature, and very few people have had trauma, falls on outstretched arms and sports injuries and stuff like that. It's more just built up inflammation of the nerve, like you said, and muscle tension and tendonitis combination, forward head posture, tension into the neck and shoulders. And more repetitive is my experience. And then I'll go over some diagnostic tests. But what's your experience, Gordy, with the type of clients that have had that over the years?
Well, whenever somebody does come in with the symptoms of tingling or numbness or some type of hand pain, the first thing I think about is following the nerve distribution and going all the way up to the neck. Because in our society right now, this forward head posture, anterior head carriage, or even text neck, that's a big thing. That can cause a lot of problems. People are hunched over computers and tablets and mobile devices, electronic devices for hours on end. And of course, you can add whiplash, past injuries of the neck, like whiplash, football, soccer injuries, like in soccer, hitting the ball on your head. The list goes on and on. So in actuality, when people force their head forward, that basically puts tension and stress on the neck. And people are thinking, well, what does that have to do with my wrist? Well, the nerve is the common denominator. So for every inch that your head is thrusted forward from its natural position, it adds an additional 10 pounds of stress to the neck, back, shoulders, including the neurology, particularly the brachial plexus. And by the way, that brachial plexus breaks into the median nerve as it distributes into the arm and to the hand. And even according to Mayo Clinic, the type of pressure there can lead to long-term muscle strain, disc herniation, arthritis, as well as pinched nerves. And I always think, Dr. Mike, double crush syndrome. Double crush syndrome is if you have a problem in your neck, whether it's forward head posturing or an old accident injury or something to do where you had a whiplash to your neck or some type of injury to the neck, that's one crush. The other crush could be local. Maybe it's from using the mouse or doing something. Maybe you had a weekend job where you're working with your tools, working with your hands, building something. So that double crush. And I personally, I'll take care from the advantage of the neck as well as the wrist. And people might be asking, well, how do you know if it's a neck? I might not have any pain at all. And what we do is we'll first may or may not take an x-ray. We'll use our clinical skills and exams to evaluate that, palpation, et cetera. But we'll also do a nerve scan, a thermography scan, and that'll also give us more information. But I'll also look at the wrist as well, because there's 8 wrist bones that can really be changed over time due to the stress that's been put on it. How about you, Dr. Mike?
Yeah, most people do not focus on their forward head posture. They don't do a lot of even range of motion of their neck in any chest and upper back brachial plexus stretching. So it should get tight over time as we age and we're doing repetitive work. It should become symptomatic if we don't do any prevention or any maintenance. So from a structural neurological point of view, you absolutely have to check the main circuit breakers, like you said. I loved what you said. You have to check the first crush potentially, because if you go in for the surgery and fix this crush in the wrist, you're missing the main breaker switch up here, and that's not going to have long-term success, even if it's perfect surgery, even if you go to rehab and do all that. And so, I have some diagnostic indicators that I use. If someone has tingling or numbness into their whole arm, into the wrist, if people put their arm above their head and the symptomatology goes away, a lot of times it is in that brachial plexus. And the true test for carpal tunnel, there's something called a Phelan's test, where you put your wrists back to back and just hold that comfortably for 30 seconds. If you get the repeat symptomatology, the burning, tingling, numbness, weakness, that's a positive test for carpal tunnel. Then when you compress right where the wrist bends, if you just compress that for 30 seconds and you get tingling and symptomatology, that's another positive test for carpal tunnel. And then there's something called Tunnell's test, where you tap on the wrist for 30 seconds, because if there's inflammation of that median nerve, you tapping gently on that, it's going to irritate that nerve, and it's going to exacerbate the symptoms or the tingling or the numbness. And then the last one is to hold your hands not rigid over your head. Just hold your hands over your head for 30 seconds. That should not cause any symptoms for the average person. If it causes your repeat symptoms into the wrist or forearm or even neck or shoulder, you need to get that taken care of. And then medically, they do EMGs, where they put needles into the nerves distribution to see if there is a nerve conductive deficiency in that. So those are pretty simple to do. Dr. Gordy, do you have any other recommendations, or what do you think of those tests?
Yeah, I know. I've had some patients that have come in with the wrist pain. They're not getting any better, and they've tried some conservative, maybe you're wearing a wrist brace at night when they're sleeping. A lot of people curl up, so they put a brace on, which is good. They might do some over the counters, which we're not big fans of because we like to get to the root cause. It's amazing how quickly these people respond. Again, I address it from both the neck and local vantage, and results are very, very good. I know that there is differential diagnosis. People have went into the medical facility, and one of the two things that I've seen that are differential diagnosis for carpal tunnel syndrome is, number one is tinnitus, and number two is arthritis. Now that's if it's a local, assuming that there's no connection here between the neck and the brachial plexus and the nerves and going into the hands. But some of the natural solutions, chiropractic. I think that's huge. And I just pulled up a study. It said this was in a scientific journal. The study was performed. It was called chiropractic manipulation. We like to call it adjustments in carpal tunnel syndrome. And the conclusion was chiropractic made a demonstrable difference through objective and subjective outcomes. So there it is. So that's number one, is a natural solution, chiropractic. People, if they're having the symptoms in the hand, I think the neck absolutely needs to be checked out. And of course, there's nothing wrong with wearing a brace. If you're doing a repetitive job where you just need that brace, that's a good thing. Or if you know that you're sleeping awkwardly, not a bad thing. Just wear that brace. I think that's fine too. This is kind of a generic rest and elevate. That was put out there by the American Academy on Neurology. Another one is if you know you're going to do repetitive tasks like being in front of a computer with a mouse, or you're doing hand drill in your workshop, or you're playing a musical instrument, well, take a break. Stop for a few minutes, wiggle the hand, wiggle the fingers, stretch the hands, get the wrists moving. And also, just as you had alluded to, Mike, be conscious of awkward positioning of your hand and your neck. That's critical. Another thing that you can do is use these oils like CBD oil. It might not fix it, but it might take an edge off, or at least distract you until you can get to the root cause and fix it. Biofreeze, it's another that you can rub on the wrist, basically does something very similar. There's also, I know a lot of other chiropractors will use soft tissue therapies, massage or distraction or stretching, or even myofascial release. And that can relieve the tension, increase nerve function, and improve blood flow to the affected area. So those are things that are really good solutions.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for sharing that. That's really, really good information and thorough information. A couple other things. I still, like you said, the first thing, number one, check out the nerve distribution in the spine and the forward head carriage and the curvature and the functionality of the cervical spine. Yeah, I think we've talked about this in other podcasts, Dr. Gordy, is a cervical pillow, chiropractic pillow, critical to get that alignment. And also bad pillows can create that forward head posture. So the right pillow, talk to your chiropractor or email us or get in touch with us, what we recommend for pillows. We could maybe do a whole podcast on pillows. And there's something called spinal molding where they sell specific foam, or you could use a dog bone pillow, or you can just lay on that to help distribute the tension properly on the cervical vertebrae. So spinal molding has been shown to improve cervical curve and help with forward head posture. In general, movement, like you're really good at, and I steal your line almost every week, is consistency is more important than intensity. Walking and moving and exercise, or biking or swimming or playing volleyball on the beach. Movement is so critical, but I like walking and the Schwinn Aerodynes, the bikes with the upper body movements. I'm a big fan of mini trampolines right now, Gordy, and the bouncing of it, just to keep the tension out of the body and to move the body, just to get the circulation going. Muscle scraping, you mentioned some soft tissue stuff. You can go on YouTube and look up muscle scraping for carpal tunnel and tendonitis of the elbow. And then I have a few other specific exercises I would like to share. My number one thing it's a test and it's an exercise. You put your fingers down. A lot of people do it sitting or standing, but I have you stand up arm lengths away from the wall, shoulder height. You want to be able to press your hand flat against that wall and not feel tremendous tension into your wrist and your elbow, because over half the people that do that can't put their hand flat against the wall, Gordy, because they are so tense and tight into that forearm. And if you have tendonitis and forearm tightness, well, those muscles originate there, but they also insert into the wrist. And that means you have inflammation and it's building and there's tension in there. And then there's probably stuff going on up in the neck and the brachial plexus. Number one exercise is the wrist extension, both of them against the wall, 1 minute a day, bar none. We all have to do it, whether we've ever heard of carpal tunnel syndrome or not. It's just a great stretch. But then just stretching the fingers wide apart, back to close together and wide apart. Do that 4 or 5 times. You can just stretch your thumb. You said it affects our thumb and fingers, so just stretch your thumb apart. There's something called a prayer stretch. You can put your hands in prayer position under your chin and then drop them down towards your waistline. That's a really, really good stretch, prayer stretch. And then we said the wrist extension, but you can also just flex your wrist as well and use some assistance there. So just general range of motion and stretching. And then one of my favorite ones is to have someone with your thumbs up, have someone grab your wrist and stretch that behind your back, because that actually stretches your forearms, but it stretches your chest and shoulders. I love that one. I don't know what that's called. Do you ever do that, Gordy, or see people in the gym stretching out before they do chest works?
I don't know the name of that one, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's a common athletic stretch in football and this and that. People are grabbing, wrists and arms and pulling behind your shoulders. So I'm a big fan of exercises just to have mobility. If you're an office worker or you're using your hands in your profession, just do some simple stretches and then use it as a test to see if it elicits any symptoms or if it causes any stiffness or tightness, or if it's hard to do. Well, then you can do it. That's your prevention program too. Get on your exercise routine and just hit those stretches a little bit every day.
That's great information, Mike.
Yeah.
Love the specifics. And also, I think it's important, the general exercises that you were mentioning, even getting out for a walk, reducing stress. Stress can be a big factor for a lot of people. My final point is, if someone is at their wit's end, they actually do have carpal tunnel syndrome, they don't know what to do, they sought medical care, they went to a chiropractor, just nothing's working, they've tried bracing. I know medical profession, they have their thing to do. The one thing about the carpal tunnel release that they do, they literally go in, they put a slice into the arm so they can get to that tunnel, and they cut some soft tissue to release it, basically. And some of the side effects can include that it just didn't work. Some of the other side effects from that, they can actually injure the median nerve, or the scar tissue can be a factor, or sensibility. So surgery isn't always the answer, but if there's a way to get to a natural approach, maybe something you learned from our podcast here today, that is just absolutely fantastic. So, Mike, any final points on this podcast this week?
I wanted to mention what I find when people complain of the carpal tunnel, or they say, I've been diagnosed with carpal tunnel. I do that wrists up against the wall, forearms stretch. Over half, probably 60 to 70%, can't do that. It's really tense. They're embarrassed that they can't put their hand flat against the wall. That's a sign of some tennis elbow, some golfer's elbow, some tension in there. I can't think of any exercises we do where we don't use the flexor muscles, where we're using a mouse, we're grabbing a coffee cup, we're grabbing a hammer, we're throwing a dart, we're grabbing a golf club, whatever we're doing, we grip and we use our flexor tendons. That's why the outside of your arm is bigger with those muscles. One of my secret weapons is to have someone get one of those very thick rubber bands, Gordy, and put that around your fingernails and then extend into that resistance for 2 seconds and then let it contract and extend, because that opens up the carpal tunnel. And that's an extensor exercise, and that will balance out all of the flexion that we do every day in our lives, and that will kind of strengthen that. It's not a huge exercise, but it will actually balance out and strengthen your extensor tendons. And so that's a really, really good therapeutic tool you can do while you're watching a football game or reading or commuting or driving. And do that in both hands, even if only one hand is symptomatic. Extensor resistance. I know physical therapists have specific bands and specific gloves and putty they have people squeeze, and or have resistant bands for the fingers. But that's really, really, really important for people to do, to stretch out the flexors against the wall and do extension. And then I've had really good luck, and I've looked up some research on nutrition. B6 and B12 are really good for nerve conduction. And people have really good luck taking B vitamins. And then the other anti-inflammatory stuff that we've talked about in the past, omega-3s, fish oil, and the omega-3s, getting off the bad fats and having the anti-inflammatory good oils in your life, the turmerics of the world, boswellia type supplements, and then just an anti-inflammatory diet that we talk about, your anti-inflammatory smoothies and the fruits and the vegetables are really, really critical to round out the holistic approach of eating well and moving well and thinking well. Decide if you want to take a few other supplements, but do some specific exercises and stretches, get a big thick rubber band, and you'll be well on your way for prevention. And then you don't have to waste your life and time and risky surgery. And people say, it's only carpal tunnel surgery. It's a surgery. Who wants to do that? Whether it's one day off of work or a month off. No, prevent it. See your chiropractor, fix your curve, fix your neck, improve your posture. It's going to have all these other mental clarity and focus and concentration, better range of motion, better sleep, better energy throughout your body. Get a decent pillow and do some spinal molding and go for a walk, decrease stress, have an anti-inflammatory diet. So pretty basic stuff, but it can be a huge benefit and avoid a lot of surgeries most likely.
Yeah, when people have the symptoms in the hand, I mean, we use our hands every day, all the time. That's a big deal. One of the things that I recommend is clutching your elbow into your side, taking your wrist and tractioning it out, and then slightly putting it in extension. So basically, if you're watching YouTube or Rumble, just pull it and just extend it out. But I like to lock this against my body to keep it solid. That way I have more leverage when I pull the traction. So I pull it up, I open it, and then extend it a little bit and hold it that way. So basically, once this is against your body, traction and extend and hold. So that's it. That's my final word, Dr. Mike. Close us out.
I love that. I just did that, and I've never done that. That feels really good. So as we close, we usually have the number one takeaway that you learned from us today. What can you talk to a colleague tomorrow at work that says, I listened to these two guys on the Health Angle talk about carpal tunnel. Do you ever have those symptoms when you're using the keyboarding or when you're playing tennis and pickleball and all that kind of stuff too? Or what, have you ever had that? Oh yeah. Or my aunt had carpal tunnel surgery or this or that. What's your number one takeaway that you can talk to someone about? And then what's your number one action step? What do you need to do? Do you need to go on walk or stress management or do this traction that Dr. Gordy taught us? Do you need to do some forearm stretches? Do you need to get a mini trampoline and bounce things out? Check in with your chiropractor. Have you been recently? Do you need to get a new pillow? So a lot of action steps that you can take to either treat and take care of it or prevent carpal tunnel. So with that said, Gordy, I'm excited to keep bringing all these simple but powerful topics every week to the Health Angle.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, our next subject is going to be listed on the screen here. So if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please subscribe. Please like our content. And of course, we always appreciate comments as well. So that concludes this episode of the Health Angle. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Health Angle podcast. Please subscribe to our channel and catch us for our next episode.